hatching, so it seems like a good time to do an extended version about hatching and putting babies in their brand new bins, dealing with how delicate they are, because baby crickets are really, really delicate. So we are about 24 hours into hatching right now. So I'm going to see how many things that I can show you. I will show you the setup of the bins that I'm going to put the babies in. I will show you how I take my breeding trays out of the incubators to get the pinheads out, put them back in. I will show you how I very unscientifically figure out how many crickets to put in each bin. I will show you how I water the crickets, how I feed them, all of the things dealing with baby crickets I will show you today. We don't have a ton of baby crickets yet. They have not hit their peak hatching, so this is a really good time to show you so I don't end up killing a bunch of them because it takes me longer to film and do all of the things. So stay tuned. First things first, we are back at the incubators. If you haven't watched my extended version of incubation, go back and watch that. These will look really familiar. Same ones. This is the same round that I'm filming. So, first I will show you the setup. Actually, I'm not going to show you the setup of this yet. Hold on, I'm going to show you something else. Before I get to the incubation thing, this is what I recommend you doing before you start touching your incubators. Get a few bins ready to go. And by ready to go, I mean at least have the egg flats stacked if that's what you use for hatching. At least make sure you have the feed plates in there. For us, we have watering trays and then a waterer that goes on top. So I make sure that I have at least a good portion of that bin set up before I am touching any of the incubators, any of the pinheads. The reason I do that is as soon as you start taking those pinheads out of those incubators and essentially concentrating them in a single bin, the clock has already started of killing pinheads accidentally because you left them too close together for too long. You need to move fast once you have them out of the incubators. So having a few bins set up just in case is the way to go. It reduces your stress massively. There are tricks and things you can do if you get yourself in a tight spot and you end up with way more hatching babies than you thought. If I end up with that problem, I will show you what I do, but set up a few bins, at least partially. It'll save you a lot of headache, and like I said, it'll reduce your stress levels a little bit. Now let's go back to the incubators. So just a refresher, here are my shelves of my incubators. So this one, and this one are hatching. They have been in for 11, 12 days now, so they're starting to hatch out. If you will notice, I have my top off of that one and my top off of that one. That is because I had a moisture problem. Even though I had egg flats in the bottom and paper towels in the bottom, we still had a problem with moisture. When I came and opened these up this morning, there was actually a small pool of water in the bottom, which was a really bad thing. I think that it's because they are essentially directly in front of the heater, and so they're getting more of that evaporation from the moist substrate in there. So I just cracked the lids so that they can have a little extra air and we don't have so much of a moisture problem. So made me panic and I freaked out and looked at all of these up here. None of these are having the same issue, which leads me to believe again that it's because the heater is where it is. Said it before and I'll say it again. Too much moisture definitely kills your pinheads, so please, please keep an eye on that. Even if you have done this many, many times, doesn't matter. Your pinheads don't care. They're still gonna die if you have condensation, so be better than me. Alright, so next step of the setup, I have two bins here. They are empty. I mean, they're kind of dirty, but it's not gonna hurt anything. So I have two of these. I set them up like this. So I have one here, one here. I'm gonna take this incubator off first and I'm gonna set it in between these two. This will make a lot more sense when I figure out how to get my phone on this so you can see me do all of these things. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that incubator, put it right here. I'm going to take all of the breeding trays out and put them into this bin. And then once I have all of those out, I'm going to shake off the pinheads into that bin and then put everything back in and shake them into there. Repeat, repeat, and then we'll see what happens. Alright, let's hope the duct tape holds my tripod there. I'll show you what I'm doing. So, take this bin down. And we're really starting to hatch now. I don't know if this will focus and you'll be able to see it, but look at all those pinheads. Take these out. Alright, so all of those that were in here are now in there. We just have the egg flats, which I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but have crickets on them. So you take this, knock them in there. Just like that. And then you put it all back together. One thing to note, the baby crickets will hang out on the bottom of these, so before you set them down, blow them off. Especially the ones that are at the top of your incubator but end up on the bottom here. There will be a lot of baby crickets on the bottom of them. And if you have long hair, before you blow on any crickets, make sure you put your hair up, or you will take them home with you. Trust me. That's one done. I'm going to do the other two, but I'm not going to make you watch that. So that's how you get the pinheads from the incubator out. And then I'll show you what we do with them after. Alright, I just poured them in a bucket that's white inside, so it's easier for you to see than coming off the black. So there's all the babies in there. You can do it by weight, but it's not super duper accurate. I will show you what I have started doing as of recent. I put about 1 ounce, maybe a little less, of volume of babies in each bin. So hold on. So I have this handy dandy graduated cylinder that was free and was meant to be used as a fertilizer measuring device. Well, not fertilizer, herbicide. So, but it was never used. Whenever you get herbicide, you get like a bajillion of these. They come with every unit. So, this is what I use to measure out babies. Sorry, there was some junk in it. So there's the 1 ounce mark right there. So I get, whatever I do, I just make sure I don't put more than that in a bin, because that is way overpopulated. 1 ounce in a 50-gallon bin works pretty well. Half an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce will also work. So you can do that. Get something like this. Graduated cylinder will work. Truthfully, it would be easier to see if this was smaller or round. But this was free, so the price was right. So what I'm gonna do, whoop, the babies are crawling up the sides quite rapidly. So you could use a funnel, but I typically don't. And the reason I don't is because normally I'm not pouring from something that's circular. I'm normally pouring something that has a corner. So I'm going to do that because otherwise I'm going to spill babies everywhere. There's still some left in that bin, but you get the idea. I know about how many is in here anyways. So we're not over the 1 ounce mark. We are below it. But that is about perfect. So I'll show you what I do for the bins now. You will also notice that I have waterers set up already. I said make sure that you get as many things as you can set up before so that time is not an issue. I'm going to put these back in the black bin that I took them out of so that they're not suffocating too. So, just a second. And know that you will inevitably lose a lot of pinheads from escaping. It just happens. If somebody's got a good idea of not losing pinheads as they escape, hit me up, let me know. But we usually end up with so many that it doesn't matter. So I have about 1 bin worth of pinheads, which is perfect because I only wanted to have to set up 1 bin. So I'll show you the setup. And then, yeah. I suppose I should talk about waterers, and I can already feel the comment section coming for me on this one. I use the same waterers for my pinheads that I use for my adults. See? So chicken waterer with pea gravel. The key between the adults and the babies is I put more pea gravel in there. So when this evens out in terms of gravity fill, there's not going to be a ton of visible water. No visible water means that the babies are not going to drown in general. I don't have a lot of babies that drown in my waterer. This works just fine. That being said, if this is all I put in there, I would have a water access problem. In that there would not be enough to support the kind of populations that we put in the bins. So I will show you what I do for my trick for that, so that the babies have plenty to drink until they're large enough. So I'll show you just a second. Alright, I will have you know that this tripod is currently propped up by 2 potatoes. So they are multi-use on the farm. So you look at this here, we have egg flats. 2 rows of half flats, 1 row of full flats, 2 feed trays, and the water. What you can't see is that I sprinkled some feed on the bottom of this bin before putting everything else in. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to slice up 2 potatoes and put them in here before I put my pinheads in here. So what I like to do on the potatoes is slice them fairly thin. The key is having lots of surface area, but not too thick. They'll eat through these, but like not all the way through. So the goal is to give them moisture through the potatoes. So slice them up and make sure that you are not sticking them all in one spot. The key for the babies, and the key for any livestock honestly, is making the access to the food and the water as easy and abundant as possible. Baby crickets definitely hard and fast with that rule. So, slice up all these potatoes all around. Lots of food options. Put a few of them in there with water. If you really want to get fancy, you can give them a little bridge onto the waterer. So that's my setup. And now I'm going to go get the babies and I'm going to pour them in the feed. So give me 1 second. So when you pour them into the bin, make sure that you're pouring them onto the feed. Why make it complicated for them? Why make it hard for them to find the feed? They are about to double in size every 3 days for like the next few weeks. They need calories, they need food. You might as well make it as easy as possible for them to get the food. Don't make them travel for it. Put them right on it. They will disperse, even though, like you can see this big lump right here that are carpeted. That'll be gone in 30 seconds to a minute. Make sure you have as much food and water access as you possibly can, as you feasibly can, so that, again, just don't give your babies an excuse to die. They have enough excuses to die. Don't give them another one. So having ample food and water seems like a really easy option. I might go a little bit overboard on the potatoes, but whatever. It reduces my mortality rates massively. So, and potatoes are pretty cheap. So, this is what the bin setup looks like. The last thing that I will do, because you need to keep the humidity fairly high in here, but not so high that you're going to have mold. So I do end up putting a top on these bins for the first 7 to 10 days. They do have ventilation holes in them, so you aren't going to end up with a condensation problem. But if your relative humidity is high, so above 60%, adding this top may give you a condensation problem in a bin like this. Because if you look at all of those potatoes all have so much moisture that they're giving off. Same sort of like evaporation microclimate thing that you're doing with the incubators happens in here. So if you have all of these sources of moisture and you don't have any way for it to escape, you're going to end up with a mold problem, which then becomes a really big problem because your feed will get moldy. Your animals can't eat that. So keep an eye on your moisture in your bins for the first few days. It is critical. First 48 hours, most important time of the entire cricket life cycle. So yeah, this is the setup, plus a top. And in case you're wondering, I did end up dropping the potatoes on the top of the bin when I tried to deconstruct it, so whoops. All right, so now that everything is in the bin is on the shelf, the last thing to do is to mark the bin, and all I do for that, do this however you want. All I do is I put today's date, so 11/22, and then this is bin number 2. So this is just masking tape. 11/22, bin number 2, and I'm going to stick that on the front of it. And that's it. Those grow bins now are ready to rock. So I'm going to go stick this on here real quick, and then we'll talk about a few more things. Alright, so let's talk about keys to success with pinheads, because truthfully, first 48 hours of the cricket's life is probably the most make or break of any time in the life cycle. Reason for that is they're very, very fragile for the first, let's call it a week, but first 48 hours, like I said, is the difference between life and death. If you've ever seen a pinhead, if you haven't ever seen a pinhead, go look at my video of hatching baby crickets. There's a few others too. But If you've ever seen a pinhead, you know that they are white or gray in color. The reason for that is they don't have a fully formed exoskeleton. That's like a very, I wouldn't even call it a shell at that point. They're super fragile, super prone to drying out, which is why your humidity is so important. But I do want to emphasize again, too much is deadly. Anytime you have condensation is absolutely your enemy, but also so is super dry heat. So delicate balance, you know, once they've hatched, 60% should get you there. A little bit higher if you're feeling really frisky. I would not go too far over 70%. You're gonna start having mold issues. It's just not worth it. So, humidity, big rock. I killed hundreds of thousands of babies before I figured out that humidity, huge rock. Anyways, don't make the same mistake I did on that one. So that's really important. The second thing that's really important is access to resources. I touched on it briefly while I was putting things together. Most livestock, feed access, I don't know how to say this, abundance of feed, perhaps, ease of access of feed, so how far does the animal have to travel to get food, impacts massively their weight gain. So I'm thinking like in terms of cattle, like the more abundant the food and the easier the access, the faster the cow is going to put on the weight, the faster you can take it to slaughter, all the things. Crickets are not far off from that. The other thing with the babies, they will essentially abort themselves, even though they've hatched and they're living and everything else, if they sense that they're overpopulated for the resources available. So if you don't have enough food out, if you don't have enough water access, your babies, you might have done everything else perfect. You might have perfect conditions, heat, humidity, all that stuff dialed in, but you didn't have enough food and you didn't have enough water. They might die because they say, you know what, we're not going to make it. It's just kind of how it is. So, like I said, we do that through essentially multiple different avenues. One of them is the feed on the bottom. Just sprinkle it on the bottom. Doesn't have to be a lot, and you don't want it to be a lot. They eat, for their body weight, quite a bit of feed, but not as much as you would necessarily think. So it doesn't need to be like a layer of feed at the bottom, but just a little sprinkling. So the guys that either jump off of the feed plate or don't get dumped directly on the feed plate, they have immediate resources as soon as they land. So that's where we do the first part. Second part is we have the 2 feed plates, separate but quite large. 2 feed plates as opposed to 1. I ran 1 for a really long time. Could never support a population above a certain amount. As soon as I added 2 feed plates, we could support a larger population. Amazing. Super easy. Something that that is not an easy or not a hard adjustment to make. So do that. And then the third thing, like I said, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of slack. I use the same waters for my adults that I do for my babies. I don't have any issues with it. If you do, water them some other way. But I use the same water. That being said, I don't want to have the water access as another reason for them to just die on me. So that's where these guys come in. This was a game changer for me. For a long time, I had really high mortality rates and I did not know why. It was actually my boyfriend Willie's idea for putting the potatoes in there. I think he actually got that from another YouTube channel, so thank you, YouTube, for helping on that one. Slices of these makes all the difference. The babies will get moisture from this. They'll also eat these. Like I will go back in a week and there will be holes in these where they have eaten them. They really like them. But the main goal for the potatoes is moisture. You could use fruit, but like potatoes just last longer. They don't rot nearly as badly. I think fruit would be a problem. If you're smaller scale and you want to do fruit, that works too. I don't know why it wouldn't, but for me, potatoes work super well and they're super cheap. So These are a game changer, and don't be stingy with these. So make sure that you are putting enough potatoes in there. Again, scatter them all around the bin. You want to make it the smallest distance possible for your crickets to get to the resources they need, whether it be food, water, shelter, whatever. Just make it easy. Give them as few excuses as possible to die, because they don't need much of an excuse to just die. So yeah, those are the 3 big keys. And then, like I said, keep the humidity high, but not too high. So I should say, so those bins that we put the tops on, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that as they get older, we go to a top off system. But for the first 7 days, I usually let it ride for 7 to 10 days. I leave the tops on just so that we can capture some extra humidity. But for the first 2 or 3 days, I will check almost religiously to make sure that we don't have too much moisture. I have lost many, many bins because I didn't check them in the first 2 or 3 days. Things got too damp, and by the time I got to them 7 days in, there was a crust of mold over all of my feed and hardly any crickets in there. Which makes sense, you know, you're rotting the feed. You are not providing your animals with quality, safe food so that they can thrive. So do keep an eye on that if you're going to do a same system similar to mine, because if you have that mold problem, you're going to lose almost your entire population very quickly. So after 7 to 10 days, we'll come in here and we will pull those off. And the big difference that you will notice after 7 to 10 days is that the pinheads are no longer gray, which they are for the first few days when they don't have that fully formed exoskeleton. The pinheads then are brown, just like the adults end up being brown. They're a light brown, so it's visible that they have an exoskeleton. At that point, they are still humidity sensitive, don't get me wrong, but they are not at as giant of a risk of drying out and dying because of that. So 7 to 10 days later, we should be off to the races. I will say another tip on the potatoes. Monitor your potatoes to see if you have a large amount of die-off in a particular bin. This will be the first indicator. If your potatoes, after 2 or 3 days, appear to be untouched, something went wrong. You need to tear that bin apart. You probably won't find any crickets in it. Either they died or they escaped. So if your potatoes are untouched, it's a very good early indicator that you have an issue. These things are freaking magical. Use them. Other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I am missing on the hatching side. I don't think so. One thing I do want to mention, don't really have an example of it right now because they're just not hatching profusely enough yet, and I don't know that these first bins will. They were my earliest lays, and sometimes those are not the best in terms of hatching. I predict my 11-13s will be pretty dramatic, and those will probably start hatching tomorrow, but really hit on Wednesday, which is fine. If you are like having a mega hatch, so like 100,000 every 2 hours kind of thing, you need to make sure that you are tending to those every 2 hours. If you don't, you are going to end up with a whole bunch of dead baby crickets. Dead baby crickets have a very particular smell. They almost smell like blood. They're like kind of metallic smell. I don't really know how to describe it, but when I smell it, I know that either I had a moisture problem or we had carpeting, and there were just too many crickets in a small little space. They all crawled on top of each other and suffocated each other. If you, and hopefully you end up in that situation where you end up having a ton of babies hatch all at once, that's something that you are going to need, not going to say round the clock, but I do have a grower that he is very, very good at hatching baby crickets, and he will get up every 2 hours until his barn is full. He usually can fill his barn probably 2 or 3 times just from one lay, if you will. So he's really good at it though. So that's one thing to note with the hatching. And the other thing, which I can't believe I didn't include this in major things when you're working with these babies, time is of the essence. So, the things I did in the video today where I was stopping and talking to you about different setups and all of those things while the baby crickets were all sitting on top of each other in a bin, that is a big no-no. Do not do that. Prevent and avoid that as much as possible. That is stressful for them. Think about if you were in a crowd and everybody was trampling over you. It's a very stressful, very uncomfortable, at times lethal situation for you. Same thing for them. So the less time that you have them without proper surface area, proper population densities, the better. So time is 100% of the essence. And like I showed you earlier, one way to reduce your stress on that is to get as many things set up prior to starting and prior to getting things out of the incubator as you can. So if you can set up feed plates, set up feed plates. I usually have at least 2, 3, 4 bins worth of everything set up. Worst case scenario, make sure that you have your egg flats stacked in your bins. For me, that is the biggest time suck, and that's the thing that takes the longest. As long as I have those up, the rest of the stuff, realistically, let's say that I have 100,000 babies hatch and that's, 30 bins worth or something. That's not what it's worth, but math right now, can't do it. So let's say that I had something like that and there's no possible way that I should be leaving the incubators alone that long. I gotta get the babies. The babies have come out and it was way more than I thought it was gonna be, and I don't have enough bins set up with feed plates and water and all of that kind of stuff. Totally fine. What you do, as long as you have the egg flat set up, just pull those bins down, dump the baby crickets in the bins without the feed and everything, and then put all the stuff in. It is more important that you get them spread out faster than making sure that you are dumping them on physical feed, if that makes sense. So time 100% is of the essence. So please don't do what I did today and stop and film and do those kind of things. You're gonna stress your crickets out. But I did it in the name of teaching you guys, so you're welcome. I think that about covers it as far as everything hatching first week, 48 hours. If I missed something, which is very, very possible, please drop a comment and ask me a question about it. If you need something that needs to be elaborated on even more than just responding to your question, I can look at doing another video for it. If you have a comment about me using the same waterers for my adults as my pinheads, you can drop that, but I can't guarantee I'll respond. Just kidding, I'll probably respond, but it might be snarky. But yeah, thank you guys for being here. As always, I appreciate your support. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, and hopefully we can help a few more people out raising the crickets.